Honde Onde Mtsan. This is Thongia, a podcast by the District 7 Legislative Office. Welcome back. Honde Onde Batsan. This is Thongia, our podcast here, and my co-host, Dr. Jerry Brett, is here with us, and we're thankful. We've established a partnership with the University of Oklahoma Native Nations Center. They've allowed us to utilize their podcast studio and their equipment. It's a nice facility.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we'd invite other tribes. Maybe some other tribes might hear this, or people who are, on different branches of other tribal governments might look at, utilizing this facility too. It's good to have you back, Dr. Brett.
Yeah, it's good to be back, Warren.
Yeah, we're coming upon the spring and, ending the spring into the summer.
Wow,
it's getting hot.
Yeah, Sundance time.
Sundance time.
Yeah, really?
That's what people used to say when you see those little cottonwood puffs.
Yes, blowing around cottonwood fiber.
Old people used to say it's time to start getting ready for the Sundance.
That's right. I recall a lot of old folks talking about it, and I didn't know what was going on when they were talking about it at the time, but I understand now what's going on.
Yeah,
well, it's good to be back with you guys today in this podcast. I'm glad we ventured into this area for the sake of not just preservation, but also communication with our District 7 people. And I hope we have a good audience as we move along in time, a larger audience when they hear about it. And information's relevant, culture, activities relevant, and we're just trying to perpetuate, life today as much as possible, but not forgetting about the past. So I welcome all the people that are listening to this at times, or will listen to it, or both, and encourage those people to encourage other Kiowa members to tune in and listen to the episodes on YouTube, or however the means are that we have given to them, accessing this activity. So good job, I think, right now.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to expand and pick more topics to discuss. I think it's always good to have different venues, because how do you communicate with everybody?
Yeah.
Everybody communicates differently. There are people that communicate on social media, websites, old people still do the telephone and want to read about it in a newspaper form. And unfortunately, newspapers are a thing of the past. I mean, they still print them, but they're hard to access anymore. A physical copy, unless you're living in Anadarko and Carnegie, who has their weekly newspaper that people like to get. So I think this podcast is just one of the many facets that we utilize to communicate to our citizens.
One of the components that I think we need to make people understand, aware. We're very sensitive and not as familiar with the values, culture values, as some of our people are, older folks especially, but we're respectful of it at the time. So, but we like to use a lot of humor sometimes, and some people may not quite understand it yet, but I know the old folks do when you tease.
Yeah.
So we tease a lot. I tease like a while ago, Warren sitting there with his arms folded. I said he's into his speaking mode. Right? So we just try to get comfortable, like we visit with one another, like we would do in your home. So I hope you all understand. I hope you feel comfortable listening to us in that way, and know that we are familiar with the culture and the ways we communicate at times. Like I said, we're just trying to expand it, though, and we'll get there in time. We'll get there in time, as far as everybody listening in as much as possible.
I want to also say congratulations to all our graduates.
Yeah.
High school and college graduates. Gosh, there's a lot of good things happening out there.
Definitely.
And, I wish them all the best in their educational endeavors. For all our students, that might be going into college or coming out of college. I've been through that, and Dr. Brett, you've been through that, and you've seen many students in your, your educational career as a professor, as a mentor, even as a grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather at that point. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, seventh generation.
And more keep on coming. More kids are going through the educational programs at different institutions, and we want them to, get a good career and be useful people. In Kiowa, they used to say, useful, makioe bay. We want our young people to be useful in our communities.
If I was emceeing a graduation and Warren, you were our guest speaker,
Yeah.
Probably one of the final questions I would ask you to convey the response to the audience as graduates is, if there is one thing you want to leave behind in terms of this, your guest speaking to the audience of graduates and parents, what would you tell them? How would you conclude your guest speaker appearance at one of these mini graduations for our Indian students, especially our Kiowa students today? What would you tell them as a person of today?
I think the Alcoa education is good, and that's what people are going through. We have to anymore,
Yeah.
but that your real education comes from your family
Yeah.
and your values and your culture. That comes from your upbringing, and hold on to that, because that's your identity. Whether it be it depends on my audience. If I'm talking to a room full of Kiowa graduates, I'm going to say hold on to that identity, because that's important, whether it be singing, going to church, 49 singing, whatever you want to call it. Keep your identity. And I think that's what's important. This Alcoa education is good too. It'll take you a long way, but you got to use both.
Yeah.
That's what I would encourage, and that's probably what I would say is that's been my education. I was fortunate to be around my old people, my grand folks, their brothers and their sisters, and they'd always, you didn't even know, I didn't know it, that I was being educated, sitting around the dinner table, listening to them talk under an arbor, just tell stories and visit. That was my first form of education. And then I picked up our language by hearing that. Now, I'm not a perfect speaker. I'm not fluent by any means. But that rhythm, almost like a song, when you could hear Kiowa being spoken, is a melody. And so it used to put me to sleep listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that I guess has encoded my brain on how it sounds. So I was able to pick it up pretty quickly because I'd heard it all my life. And so I think that would be my message. Hold on to your identity.
Well, a lot of the speakers that I listened to over the past month or two, and this is the time when they come out. We'll talk about other things that are coming out at this time of the year also among our people, but that seems to be a common theme among a lot of them about the young people and the identity factor that they want to encourage them to hold on to, and they usually support that theme with the concept of culture. What is your culture? Hold on to your culture. And as an academic person and using research to address many activities, I asked, how much culture do our young people know about today in terms of their tribal culture? Or in some cases, tribal cultures, meaning that there are 3 or 4 tribes within their blood as far as mom and dad as being Kiowa, one being Cherokee, part of it being Choctaw, so you got 4. But what are some of the ways or means of retaining your culture? And obviously language is one of them, and through different type of modes of activity of language, singing, talking, dancing, whatever. So we talk about culture right now. It's important. What do you think is probably one of the most important components of culture? Obviously, you have a specialty in that area that you think of.
I think that would be language. So much of our values, traditions, customs, whatever you want to call them, they're encompassed in our language, in prayers and songs. I go to Native American church meetings. You don't hear our language anymore in there as much as you used to, but it was kind of all tied in together. I think that's an important part. Not, you have other things that go along with that. Your relationship to your relatives, relationship to the land. I think there's a lot that plays into identity, but I think language is a key factor. I don't know if it's the most prevalent or the most important factor. I think I can be swayed because I think there's other important parts. I'm still kind of learning myself when it comes to what's the most important part of our identity. Right now, I'd say language, but I think that could change in years to
One
come.
day in my past history, I recall this is a cultural thing that I'm going to talk about that I still remember. Not vividly because I'm getting past that age of a clear mind, really, but I still have one. And
Oh,
this time of the year, I remember we would be sitting there talking, and we off in the clouds, and times we could hear thunder, and it seemed like it came about a lot more during this time of the year than before. I could have just been getting my imagination out of order because Grandpa was a good storyteller.
mm-hmm.
And he would sometimes we'd be sitting and he'd be telling us about a few things and maybe sing us a little song, and we would act like we knew what we were doing and dance, but we didn't know how to go about it. But we were just having a good time listening. But he would quieten us down and say, "Shh, you boys and girls, y'all listen." He would talk half Kiowa, half English, but he was a fluent Kiowa speaker, and he sometimes spoke what I call broken English. But he said, "Listen now." He said, "God is making the announcement now that it's a new life, new beginning for us. Hear that sound? That's the announcement." It was thunder.
Mm.
And I just thought about that and how, as I got into academics, I learned the Sundance ceremony, what it was all about in theory and academics, because I think my grandma was the only last person to participate in the Sundance before the government took it away or made it illegal, as they said, for the people to practice that. But I always remember the announcement of spring, new life coming in. The trees would be blooming and all the allergies for me would start up probably.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
but that's when we held our gatherings, big gatherings, not just Kiowa but Comanches. But there's one episode I remember a great deal that she would talk about, and I've often wondered whenever we had storms occur and there was a threat of a tornado, how come Grandma always would be the one screaming around and saying, "Yo, yo, 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 you get the kids together." And, I don't care if it was 4 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She always had a way of making that announcement to all of us, and it was loud.
Mm-hmm.
And we would all gather in the cellar, be about 20 of us, sometimes trying to sleep or whatever the case. But
Mm-hmm.
I was asking, how come we don't hear about these tornadoes coming and, addressing our doing damage to our Kiowa homes, our arbors out there.
Yeah,
The wind would blow it away real easy,
Yeah.
And how do we? What is a tornado, Grandma? What is it all about, as you see it? And I vaguely remember, not clearly, I vaguely remember her telling us it was a man on a horse that was Kiowa man, or she gave it a name, him or her or it a name, and I don't remember. Maybe you can,
Yeah.
relate what you know in language
Sure.
there to that area, and how you make the awareness of the tornado that you're Kiowa.
Yeah.
You did that a certain way by placing something out in your area, a knife or something, or a bow. I don't remember distinctly what items were, but I remember the little process she said they went through while it was approaching. That was one of the reasons it identified you as, and it never done damage to you. It didn't threaten you. It went around you, or it hopped over you, So during this time of the year in our culture, I think about culture as being something that we really, really need to focus at the home, not just in school.
Mm-hmm.
Kiowa parents need to teach their kids about culture as much as they know, rather than depending, I think, on the public school. Because the last place you want to teach Kiowa culture is probably public school people doing it. I don't think they know about as much. So during this time of the year, what's your recollection as you were talked about this new season when tornadoes came and what she had a term for it.
Yeah, the tornado. Monkoi. That's was a term for tornado. And the same way, Dr. Brad, I've heard that the tornado is actually the tail of the horse that you had referenced. and then it kind of goes, any way it goes, and same way, our my elders used to talk to it, and
Yeah.
just like you were respect it. They respected it as a relative. I've not heard a whole lot of stories about how it came to be, or how it was released, but Kiowa people, I think, respected, what happened there. And like you said, a lot of our Indian people would put an axe or a knife out, and to identify, that was their home, and the tornado would go around them. And I think, something that my old people did when they were talking to this tornado. I remember my grandpa, Joe Big Bow. One time we had a tornado come in, and we were all living in Texas, and he got a knife out, and he was talking about it, and he was talking to the tornado, and then he said, "I'm gonna pray, and then I'm gonna put this knife out, so they'll know that Monkoi will know this is our house." Same way, and so he prayed all in Kiowa, He would pray, and then he'd put that knife down in the yard, or the axe that he had, I think it was a knife. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy. We put it down there, and it didn't hit our home. Unfortunately, we have so many tornadoes now. And a funny story, Dr. Brett, since we're joking, I put my axe out when I lived in Blanchard, and my wife got mad because it didn't rain for about 6 months. And she blamed me for the drought that we experienced there in Blanchard.
You should have put a knife out there instead of an axe.
Yeah. And she still, to this day, she thinks that I'm, that axe or that spirit's following me, because, anytime there's a storm in Skytook, it seems to miss us when we're home. So, fun. That's just, a little bit of laughter that we have about it. But I think we share that same story of a horse.
They say, "What's your point?" Well, the podcast sometimes isn't just about politics and policy. It's about
culture,
maintaining our identity, as Warren was talking about. And one of the ways I say to perpetuate is in your home culture, Kiowa people. If you never heard about this tale before, you know a little bit about it right now. Man, the accuracy may be debatable, but we're not here to debate it necessarily. Yeah. We're here to introduce it again and say what we see at times and put it in perspective today. So it behooves you, I think, as parents, to teach your children, about some of these cultural tales and myths and how they relate to life.
Sure.
Because that's the Kiowa way, in my opinion. That's the way I was taught growing up. I'm not saying I live by it nowadays, but I've told that story to my grandchildren, to my children, my grandchildren, and believe it or not, my great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
I have 4 of them right now. The oldest one is 4. So I think my point is teach them a lot more. If you hear and heard about it, tell them about it. Unfortunately, a lot of you probably haven't, because the people who told that story, like Warren mentioned about his grandpa, are not here anymore.
Yeah.
And my grandpa, Cecil Horse, and Jenny Hompe, that's my mom's parents, and they're the ones that told us about it, and they're not here, but I'm here, and I do what I think needs to be done in our home culture, and that's to explain, to tell them, not to confuse them, though. Yeah. So the culture is so important. That we practice it more or talk about it more, both at home, not always just at the powwows. And I don't mean to immerse yourself totally in it. That's your choice. Your prerogative is how you raise your children. But in order to keep our identity, I think it's an effective way of maintaining who we are identity-wise, to teach your children about it.
I think you brought up a good point. Diversity of stories. Not about the accuracy.
Yeah.
It's about telling, I think that adds to oral tradition, oral encyclopedia or library, everybody's, and old people used to embellish those stories, and that led to a lot of the interesting aspects. It may be different, but that's okay. I think the main point is, those Monkoi is our relative, and as Kiowa people, we talk to it, and we have a way to identify it to go around us. And, in Scott Momaday, rest in peace, he had a part of the story, and, his book, Way to Rainy Mountain.
Yeah.
It's got 3 different voices, and They're all oral traditions. But just kind of want to share a little bit since we're talking about this time of the season with tornadoes happening. The tornado that just hit Sulphur and Barnesdall. Our Kiowa people, I think it's an interesting part of our culture to tell it. So I'm going to read a little bit here from Scott Momaday's book, Way to Rainy Mountain. The Kiowa language is hard to understand, but you know the storm spirit understands it. This is how it was. Long ago, the Kiowas decided to make a horse. They decided to make it out of clay, and so they began to shape the clay with their hands. Well, the horse began to be, but it was terrible. It was a terrible thing. It began to writhe slowly at first, then faster and faster until there was a great commotion everywhere. The wind grew up and carried everything away. Great trees were uprooted, and even the buffalo were thrown up into the sky. The Kiowas were afraid of that awful thing, and they went running about talking to it. At last, it was calm. Even now, when they see storm clouds gathering, the Kiowas know what it is. A strange wild animal roams on the sky. It has a head of a horse and a tail of a great fish. Lightning comes from its mouth, and the tail whipping and thrashing on the air makes the high, hot wind of the tornado. But they speak to it, saying, "Pass over me." They are not afraid of Monkoi, for it understands their language. And then the other voice that Scott Momaday uses talks about, at times the plains are bright, calm, and quiet. At times they are black, and with the sudden violence of weather. Always there are winds. And then he talks about, what we talk about.
Yeah.
And, he says he recalls his grandmother's house, going in the cellar like you were talking about, and them always preparing and talking to it, asking Mon Koi to pass over us. And I think we still have those people that know how to do that, pray about it, and ask, it's important we try to use our language because
Definitely.
Mon Koi understands our language. And I think that's a interesting part, even just learning and trying to say, go around me. I think that's a pretty good way to kind of understand, our relationship to this storm spirit.
Sure.
And I don't know what the interpretation of Monkoi is, but, it seems to always, old people had a way of taking care of things.
Well, maybe someone who listens to our podcast can help us there. As far as the interpretation is concerned, we can test the boundaries of our podcast to some extent with our audience doing that. But I believe it's something that the tribe as a government should focus on a great deal within the organizational structure of this tribe. I think we need some refinement of the cultural component that we see ourselves as responsible for, if we are, or if we do see ourselves that way. And if anything, I think we need to have this part of our organization as a tribe. We need to institutionalize a cultural element even more so formally, whereby we can do more of what we're doing right now via technology, being communication, podcasts, whatever.
Absolutely.
Even making film or video about it to help, preserve or perpetuate or both, the cultural identity of our people. What better group than the tribe as a whole, especially with the younger people nowadays who have the means but lack a little bit of the knowledge base, and the old folks can feel a little bit more of that gap. More so now, we better hurry because as old folks are getting close to the time we move on to in life. So it's important that the tribe takes some leadership here other than just a small cultural commitment. We need to institutionalize it. We need to fund it, and we need to get out and do some tangible things that promote cultural identity other than the conventional things we've been doing in our communities.
Yeah.
And it's something I encourage the legislators to look at, something I encourage the executive body to look at, and sit down and have a good, frank, open forum about it and see if we can lay some plans for the institutionalization to preserve as a tribal government. So I think it's a good discussion to have.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Brett, I will say, as your tribal legislator, I fully support cultural program, language programming, identity maintenance, and preservation, into the future. I'll fully support that with our funding. And I think we have to have people to plan it and execute it, and execute as a part of the executive branch. So we need them to start thinking about ways in which they can broaden their vision on what it means to maintain that identity, perpetuate that identity into the future. Like you're saying, we have the tools are out there.
Yeah.
And young people have the know-how. Like you see your great-grandchildren, they probably know how to do more stuff on your phone than you do.
Yeah, it's for sure.
Yeah, and
I have to call them over for technical assistance.
They're already far more technologically advanced than their grandparents and great-grandparents. But we got to figure out, somebody needs to execute that within the executive branch to start that vision.
Well, I'll take this to another, put a little turn in it, not take it away, but I was looking over our budget, the one that came about recently, and as an administrator, and we're very well versed in fiscal management, as we call it, and it takes a lot of planning, as you well know, to look ahead in order to make ends meet, to put it simply. And I was looking specifically at the cultural component of the tribe, and I didn't see much of it other than the language program, and I think that's been recent as a result of soft money funding at one time. Now we have institutionalized it somewhat, the language program. I didn't see much. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the budget, this one that we just voted on, as far as transparency is concerned, because I think it's critical that we understand where that money's going, and not just in the words of fiscal management, but in layman terms, what are the line items? What's a line item, and where are the cultural emphasis in the budget? If any place, it may be under education, it may be, but we need to discuss that a little bit more and encourage our viewers, our listeners, to ask questions about the budget for the sake of clarity and the future here, where we're going as a tribe.
So we just passed our budget modification, which is basically related to our 2023-24 budget. We get money from different funding agencies. Department of Labor, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Health and Human Services. There's all these different funding agencies, but they are all on different calendars. So like our tribal fiscal year starts July 1st. The federal government, their starts October the 1st. Then you have a calendar year. Some programs like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, their 638 funding for education and job placement and training, they run on a calendar year. So you don't get that money till January. So we have different funding agencies, and they release their funds to the tribe at different times of the year. And in our Constitution, it says that the people must vote on these funds, so there's transparency on where the funding is going. And so because we vote on our budget in June, now we have received all this money, we have to report to the people about how much we're getting in education and housing and job placement and training. There's a whole lot of funding agencies that give us money. So the modification is kind of cleaning up and letting the people know what is being included in this budget. So that the modification is to kind of put it out there that this is what we're receiving as a tribe. But also there are we're closing out at in the middle of your fiscal year. Usually most organizations there might be some unfunded requests that need to be, maybe some programs are not spending money, and they could use that money to buy whatever, furniture, or invest in more staff to bring them on, and kind of there might be some modifications to that budget based upon the need out there in the community. So the budget process, the modification hopefully will get done quicker. The modification just happened, and it's a little confusing to people. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you asked that
definitely.
question to clarify. What's a modification mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of clearing up that budget, making sure that we are addressing the needs with the current budget, and there might have to be some changes made. Money might need to be moved around, and it's kind of our way of reporting that to the people. The annual budget coming up is for 2025. So this vote will happen June the 1st. So everybody needs to still send in their balance because you're funding tribal programs. You're also going to be looking at what we're projected to get in terms of revenue from the casino, from the funding agencies based upon historical data, what we have gotten in the past. They put it on that budget to kind of put out a number. I came from higher education. I will tell you, higher education gets about almost close to $800,000 annually. Yeah. But that number, we won't know that number till January, which is the middle of our tribal fiscal year.
It causes some problems for you, too, as management is concerned with your students.
Exactly. We're projected to get this much, and so we have to use our historical number in this budget to let people know we're voting on this. But then that number could be a little more. It could be less. Because we are not a self-governance tribe, the 638 programs, we're going to have to rely on the federal government to give us that number in January. And what's bad is that number, the money may not follow till March, April, and you've been in education.
You know certainly have.
You know it takes a long time for that money to kind of work its way down to the tribe, and it's even longer to the students that need it out there.
A lot of our students fall through the cracks.
Yeah, exactly.
That you're talking about. That's part of the cracks I'm talking about. Then fiscal or management of the budget's difficult. I understand that.
Yeah,
I don't know if our people outside who listen understand it. It's, they're not necessary people that look at it like we do as administrators or managers per se. So I think it's critical that we try to explain the budget over a period of time, the annual versus such, and then break it down. Mm-hmm. You say everybody has to report, by a certain time what they have left or what they. Okay, that means everybody, meaning department and the chair person, including the executive branch, who's responsible for getting the budget, and then who's responsible for the processes of the budget. Because I know KIC comes into play somewhat here too, as far as the government is the governance is concerned within the tribe. So.
Yeah, I can explain.
Yeah, do that for us right now.
So the executive branch, they oversee the Department of Finance.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have all the historical records, the system that they use for accounting purposes. That's all housed in the executive branch. So they actually hold on to the budget in the Department of Finance. We have the deputy CFO and the CFO. They manage that in accordance with the tribal chairman. So the chairman submits the budget to initiate. Usually it's about February the 1st when the annual budget comes out, and the chairman puts it together. He works with his team to put together a document. He sends it over to the legislative branch. We're the first. The chairman, of course, he's saying, I'm good with this. He'll approve it. Go ahead and send this to the legislature now. We're the next check. We'll look at the budget, see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. We'll scrutinize those budgets, ask questions. This is the second year, that we've passed a budget, and we did that through a lot of difficult questioning to department chairs, justification for why you need this money. It takes almost like what the state government's doing right now with a budget summit. We did that with the department chairs, the chairman, finance team, to kind of have a clear idea on what their spending needs are, and question where's this money going. I think we'll only get better. The tribe's new to this process, and we have to start somewhere, but we have to build upon that now. And transparency, like you talked about, is important because I passed a law, the Budget Transparency Act this past year, telling the chairman to make a booklet. Well, he made a booklet, but I still don't think it tells the clear picture. People still have questions. It's hard to communicate. People are questioning what's in this budget. For example, Dr. Brad, somebody's questioning what legislators make.
Yeah.
And they think we make a six-figure income, and that's not true, because you're not. We have a salary line item on our budget. It's over $700,000, but you have to take into account you're paying office staff, yourself. We pay for an administrator, a legislative administrative assistant, a secretary, and then we have some contract workers out there that we have to pay. So as a legislator, I'm not making, six-figure income. I'm getting by on what I make, which is, in comparison to other tribes, is quite minimal. I'll go ahead and just say it. I only make $60,000 a year, and that's I'm getting by, and I appreciate that. But there are some people out there that think we should be paid less or work part-time, and there's a lot to this job, and I think our legislators do the best they can with what they are given, but the budget is still not where it should be, and I think we'll have to continue to build upon that.
Well, you just gave us an element of transparency by telling us, not that you have to, but you did. That's some of the questions that people have of transparency, not just you, but also the chairman, the vice chairman, and the people are entitled to know that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Administratively, I think 90% of administrative responsibility, accountability have to be reported. There's some of it that doesn't for privacy's sake, for funding sake, et cetera, but I think it's difficult to explain to people when we got such a complex system right now. And that's not necessarily tribal system, it's a federal government system. And I think only recently we probably came into a tribal designated system, which is required for self-governance tribes, financial stability reflected in management. So I really appreciate you offering that information, not that you had to. How the budget is made up, I think to put it simple, is what's the organization of it? One, for example, office of executive office, and this budget for personnel, for travel, for blah, 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 blah. 2, the legislative branch, the same thing. And 3, the KIC, and that's very minimal.
Correct.
And 4 being another, whatever. So is that the structure that y'all follow and ask to fill in the areas here?
I think the question we're getting right now is, you're right. Executive branch pieces the budget together and submits it to the legislative branch, who approves it or denies it. And then if it's approved, then it goes on to the ballot and is voted on by the Kiowa Indian Council. And I think we're missing a step right here. The Kiowa Indian Council doesn't have any input, on what that budget says. And what it says is that the budget should be presented at the annual KIC meeting in April. And we did that this year, and it's not perfect. They made a booklet, and they kind of told the people about what we're spending money on. They do actually make the full detailed budget available if you request it through the executive branch. If you contact the tribe and say, hey, I want to request a full detailed line item budget, they will send that to you, a digital copy of what was submitted. And that'll go, and it's 31 pages long.
Oh, yeah, well, that's small compared to what I've seen in some other places.
But you can read it. But what I had originally, the intent was, we want them to publish the full detailed line item so people can read through that and ask questions. But I think a lot of people felt like, listing out job titles and salaries, what people were getting paid, was a violation of personal identifiable information. I don't disagree. I'm not an expert in data protection, but the chairman, I said, well, if I write a law that says you'll be more transparent with the budget, then you have to make a booklet and make that booklet available on the website, put it out at the KIC meeting. They did put booklets out, and I believe it is on the website, the booklet, that if you want to read through it. But I think it leads to some more questions rather than answers right now. So we got to figure out, how do we improve that transparency.
Yeah, well,
it's a step forward, but
yeah.
it's not perfect.
Here's the situation real quick, relevant to communication, and includes the budget and other areas besides the budget as far as our governance is concerned, and our government, and the Constitution. D7 people, citizens, tribal citizens, you know this from your experience the past 4 years or so, and probably even before that. How far away from the hub are they, or from the center, or from the headquarters of the tribe, correlates a great deal to how much they're informed. Even in this day age of technology, you got people living in Seattle, Washington, and you got people living in Miami, Florida, and I'm kind of being extreme there, in Cleveland, Ohio, and Dallas, Texas, and San Francisco, and you have an abundance of people living in that area. Not as much of those located right here in Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas and Colorado. In terms of District 7, this is one of the reasons we're having the podcast to get more information, communicate more so to them. But I wonder how many of them actually got on the internet, whatever means, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, to look at the budget and to scrutinize it. If they do, I wonder how many of them just got on there, and when it came time to vote, they didn't bother to do that. They just voted, if you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how we might expand this communication with these 7 people, because it seems like a lot of them are complaining about something that they have access to, but they haven't been, taking the time to go out and actually look at and examine this stuff that's available to, if they have the means to it, i.e. computers, internet, blah, blah, blah. So it's a step forward compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
And I think we need to start talking more about that forward motion rather than taking a step backward like a lot of them do. So I encourage them a lot to look at it on the internet. And if not, you got a legislator. You can call and write, or both, ask him. And part of his role is to assist us as far as the District 7 people are concerned. And he will. I promise you he will.
Let's go back to your question, though. Talking about language and culture.
Yeah,
Where is that in the budget? I don't think I gave you a full answer. So I think right now language, and I think there's some opportunities for historic preservation to kind of do some training, get some grants, to do little classes like that. But right now all the culture and is within our Department of Kiowa Language.
Yeah.
That's a big task to kind of take that on. That needs more staffing, and I only see them. Money. You got to be supported by all Hongia.
Yeah.
Get that to them, and then expand that into schools. And how do we have these programs that are Kiowa programs, not school programs, not JOM, where you're dependent upon a person who might be non-Indian or another tribe to teach Kiowa culture. Our Kiowa tribe should be asserting themselves into those schools, because their citizens go to those schools and teaching these facets of Kiowa culture, tradition, songs, dances, identity.
And that's what I mean by institutionalization of it, culture within the tribe.
Correct.
And I think partnerships are very, very critical means of making that happen. And I encourage the tribal leaders to get out and try to formulate more That's how we're doing this podcast today. It's with a
partnership.
Yeah, informal partnership. Yeah. Hopefully we can formalize later on into something we can expand this. So I think it needs to be done. I think in order to perpetuate, to maintain, attain, sustain culture within our tribe, it is the factor, I think, that makes us who we are, as well as the land base that we have. Our sovereignty is being attacked at this time in this country, in this state. And I don't know what the future holds, but I'm threatened as a tribal member with losing that. What I see happening on the national level, and with the advancement of artificial intelligence and technology, and sometimes I'm feeling like we're going to get left further behind if we don't get our head together and start investing some of our monies. That includes our tribal gaming money.
Yeah.
It has limited restrictions, I think, compared to the federal funds that we get. for tribal service areas only, meaning that we can't use that federal funds for District 7 as much. Federal, because of some of the restrictions of having to live in the tribal service area. So I think our next podcast, we might want to look at the D7 specifics, how we might be able to provide full services to all tribal members.
I think that'd be a good conversation to invite the chair
Excellent.
and the executive director to kind of just ask, these questions, because I guarantee you that's what District 7 citizens are wanting. They feel like they're a stepchild in this tribe because they don't get services like you do if you live in Lawton or Carnegie or Anadarko. They want the same access to some of those services. Now, I don't know how you'd go and mow all the people's yards in Seattle or Miami, but but maybe it might be just some. Hey, maybe they can furnish a little check for some gas.
Yes.
So you can mow your yard. Might be the answer there. I'm not sure, but I think that's a very, very important, topic that needs to be addressed in the budget, because how are District 7 citizens going to be served? Well, I've initiated that conversation with the executive director, i.e., the director of higher education or the tribal education agency. These service areas need to be amended and broadened to incorporate more of our District 7 citizens. And they're looking into that. They're contacting their funding agency, for example.
Well, I hope they step forward into self-governance status will allow us to renegotiate some of those concepts that have inhibited especially our District 7 people receiving the full services. And I don't know if that's just a big fantasy of mine. It's a dream. I think with my academic training, I think it's a fantasy, really, meaning that it's going to take congressional interaction to make that happen as far as the regulations that govern the federal money that service our people. My final word on is that it takes me back to the Constitution and how effective that's been for us as a tribe today, divided up into 7 districts, and one of those 7 districts having a majority of Kiowa tribal members, but yet they're the ones that are least serviced when it comes to the tribal funds that come in. So I think that's a whole new area for podcast discussion development next time, and we might want to look at that and bring in the tribal chair and whoever, and maybe even some of the legal people who might be able to address some of the complexities of tribal policy today in today's world. I'm not perpetuating something that's out of date.
Sure, absolutely.
And as we move towards self-governance, I think it's imperative that we be informed. I think training, for lack of a better word, is good, but I also like to think our education has helped us a great deal, some of us, in terms of what we do with the tribe, et cetera. So I'm positive. I encourage people, we're not here to cause any issue. We're here to plan, also give our input on the future.
Healthy dialogue.
Definitely.
Discussion.
Definitely.
So I just want to encourage all our District 7 citizens, get out there and dig into the tribal website. It's not the best. That needs to be redone too, but I think we can we're trying to put stuff out there on the website for people to read and dig into. A lot of people don't realize we now have a legislative law archive where you can read all the laws that the legislature has passed since the new government was institutionalized in 2017. So that's something new on our legislative website, so people can read into those and see what business is being done since the formation of the new government. But I think it's that budget's out there. Read into it and kind of dig into it. And if you do have questions, you're right, Dr. Brett. If you have questions about that budget, give me a call. Send me an email. We have our office in Norman and our office in Tulsa. The staff will take your call, and I will definitely call you back. I have emails, that my office manager, Tara Bigbo, is very, very meticulous about calling people back and answering emails because she's a District 7 citizen herself. She wants a response.
Yeah, well, I have to commend you, all of you that work with the District 7 office. Really, it's I know it's almost an impossible job to reach all of the District 7 people where they have a feeling of being involved with the tribe. Ideally, that's the fantasy I talk about. It's a dream. Hopefully, I should say that we can, our goal we can achieve in time. But you guys have worked. I've been here once. Y'all worked hard. The amount of money you're being paid is not relevant as much to the amount of work that you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And what we are trying to accomplish here as far as service and all Kiowa tribal people. And I commend y'all for that. I have my suggestions, as you well know, and as a District 7 member, and I'll continue to advocate for us in that way, in a good, positive, intelligent way, and maybe a little bit of politics mixed in here and there, But I think the essence of who we are, it's the way we started this podcast today, and it's the way we might want to conclude it, going on that we are Kiowa people, and we have our opinions of what it is, and some of us are strongly, we react strongly to it, and some of us lay back and don't. So I enjoy talking about the culture and who we are and where we're going forward that you mentioned today and tomorrow. And I have this complete faith that we'll get there in time. If we can deal with the politics nationally, I think that's the only concern I have is the sovereignty of our tribe in the future. And
absolutely, Dr. Brad. Good words. And, I think it's a good time to kind of wrap things up here for this episode. Thank you, Dr. Brad. And, since we've had all these graduates going on and, you just talk about going forward, we want to move forward. And sometimes, our Kiowa people, our old people used to pray about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of that times those prayers evolved into songs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a song that I dedicate for, traveling. And I'm going to sing it, and we're going to include our students in here, people who just graduated. But like yourself, Dr. Brad, you're still traveling. You're still educating. And we want you to continue to go forward, too, for many, many more years. So,
give it to us, Mr. Queton. Let us have it. It's a good note to conclude this podcast on.
Dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, gakom topegu ki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da. Dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, kakom topegu ki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki 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 dae kampoyom da. Kakom topegu ki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki 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 dae kampoyom da, kakom topegu ki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da, dokya pedoki dae kampoyom da.
Oh.
Ahoo. Well, we will see you next time on the next episode of Tongya. Hega am I bonta, hega am I don't I ta. Deon de aho for tuning in to this episode of Tongya, our District 7 podcast. The music was provided by Mr. Terry Tsotai. For more information on our legislative work, please visit our website, kiowatribe.org/district-7. Thank you all for tuning in. Hega am I don't I ta.